So as we saw, Sub-Saharan Africa reporting its first death in Burkina Faso. What are some of the measures that African countries are taking to try to contain the virus?
Thank you so much. First, I would like to really thank African governments for all the work that they are doing to protect their citizens. We've heard that some of them are doing public education in terms of washing hands and social distancing. Some of them have actually closed schools, like in Kenya, they have suspended all schools until further notice. Others are restricting travel, to enable them to monitor people who are coming in and to make sure that they don't have the virus. And the idea here is to try and stop this epidemic from spreading through the community. So some have already put in place medical facilities or designated medical facilities where people can be isolated and treated. But we know the situation in Africa. There is a problem with our health system, insufficiency and also inadequate resources. So as WHO has said, we are facing a huge challenge in Africa, so we hope that we will overcome this.
And we have certainly seen a more proactive and rapid response from African leaders. What sort of lessons or experience from handling other outbreaks in parts of the continent, like with the Ebola outbreak, could really be applied to handling COVID-19?
Yes, when the Ebola epidemic broke in West Africa, some of the governments took very good measures to help their citizens to protect themselves. Public education was one of them in Liberia, even canceling funeral services, church services, and encouraging family members and communities to distance themselves from one another. And that's a challenge for the Africa community, where people are so friendly and interact very closely. But we have countries like Nigeria, Ghana, and Senegal that were able to limit the spread of Ebola. And one of the things is, like Nigeria, they had very strong health services that really managed to contain the spread of the Ebola epidemic in Nigeria. And they also used public education to encourage people to take care of themselves and to avoid spreading it or to avoid getting it. So there are lessons learned from those countries, and we can do the same in the rest of Africa.
Now, according to a report by South Africa's Rand Merchant Bank, they say Kenya's economy has the highest overall COVID-19 risk, followed by Ghana and Egypt. What makes certain African countries more vulnerable than others when it comes to some of the economic shocks that can come with an outbreak like this?
So we know that the outbreak is worse in some countries than others. We know it has been worse in Asia. We know that it is worse in Italy, and we know that in places like South Korea. But some have managed to contain it, although the jury is still out. I think Kenya is a tourist country. There are also so many business companies that operate in Kenya, and people are coming in and out. So Kenya is vulnerable to people coming in. I think the first case was from a woman who entered Kenya in early March and came with the virus, 27 years old. And so we know that the first thing that the Kenyan government did or should have done, actually they already did it, is to restrict travel. Although we still have some airlines coming in, such as Ethiopian Airlines, which is still operating in so many of the countries that are the epicenter of the epidemic. So Kenya and other vulnerable countries, have to come together to find out how they're going to not only to restrict, but to have a profuse health response to this situation, to manage it, to contain it before it becomes, it starts spreading in communities, because we know that our communities are vulnerable, especially those who live in informal settlements. But we also
right.
know that the family is a breeding station for this pandemic such as this or epidemic such as this. So there's more education that needs to be done, and
Right.
they need to partner with.
Well, our thanks so much to Pauline Muchina, the Public Education and Advocacy Coordinator for the Africa region at the American Friends Service Committee.